When you think of Southwest Asia and North Africa, you probably think of ancient history, or maybe modern headlines. But what if I told you that the real story of this incredibly diverse land can be understood as a series of massive challenges, and the amazing, often brilliant ways people have responded to them?
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle the huge question of who gets to rule. Then we'll get into a resource that's been both a blessing and a curse. From there, we'll dive into some of the world's toughest conflicts, look at the deep divisions inside some nations, and finally, we'll talk about the fight for the most precious resource of all. So, first things first, the most basic challenge for any society: who's in charge? The question of governance, how a country should be run and who gets to make the big decisions, well, that question has been answered in a lot of different ways across this region.
Now, in this part of the world, monarchy has been a pretty common answer. But, and this is a big but, that one word can mean a whole lot of different things. Trust me, not all monarchies are created equal.
Here's a perfect example of what I mean. On one hand, you have an absolute monarchy, like Saudi Arabia, where the king holds the ultimate power. But then you have a constitutional monarchy, like in Jordan, where the king's power is actually limited by a constitution and he has to share power with people who are elected. Two monarchies, two very different systems. And what's really fascinating is that even the most traditional systems are changing. Look at Saudi Arabia. In just the last few years, we've seen these huge reforms, especially for women. Things that were totally unthinkable not long ago, like driving a car or voting in local elections, are now happening. It's all part of a massive push to modernize the country.
And just to show you how diverse the region really is, let's look at Israel. It's a completely different model, a parliamentary democracy. So what does that mean? Well, citizens don't vote for a single person, they vote for a political party. And then those parties get a certain number of seats in the parliament, called the Knesset, to form a government.
And this slide shows what happens when people feel their government has just stopped listening. In 2011, this incredible wave of protests, which we now call the Arab Spring, just exploded across North Africa. People were fed up with corruption, with having no jobs, no freedom, and it led to these longtime leaders in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya being overthrown, just gone.
Political power is almost always connected to another kind of power, and that's the power of resources. In this region, having immense natural wealth creates its own very unique set of problems, but also some pretty incredible opportunities.
Just take a second and let this number sink in. Nearly half of all the known oil reserves in the world are right here. You really can't overstate how much this one fact has shaped pretty much everything in the modern history of the region.
The money from all that oil has fueled a transformation that is, frankly, mind-boggling. We're talking about building these gleaming, ultra-modern cities right out of the desert. It's created brand new industries from scratch, and it's paid for a level of national development that was just unimaginable a few generations ago.
But here's the catch. All that rapid growth created this massive need for workers, a need that couldn't be met locally. So what happened? A huge reliance on guest workers. These numbers are staggering. In Saudi Arabia, they make up over 75% of the workforce, 70% in Kuwait. It's a huge paradox.
So, the smart leaders in the region are definitely playing the long game. They know the oil isn't going to last forever. So what's the plan? They're diversifying. They are pouring money into new industries, logistics, finance, tourism, you name it, to build a future that doesn't depend on what's buried under the sand.
This fight over resources often bleeds into deeper, older conflicts. Conflicts about history, about identity, and about the actual lines drawn on a map. So now, let's turn to one of the most difficult and emotionally charged challenges in the entire world.
To understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you really have to rewind the clock. After World War I, the British were put in charge of the area. But as tensions grew between Jewish and Arab communities, the brand new United Nations stepped in. In 1947, they voted to split the land into two states. Jewish leaders said yes, but Palestinian and other Arab leaders said no way. And when Israel declared independence in 1948, the first war broke out.
And here's something people often miss. The map itself is a huge part of the problem. Look, the two main Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza, are physically separated from each other. The West Bank has no access to the sea, and Gaza's borders are tightly controlled. That geographic reality makes the idea of a unified, independent country incredibly difficult to pull off.
But this goes so far beyond maps and borders. This is a conflict that's all about identity, history, and deeply held beliefs. And as this quote says, Nowhere is that clearer than in the fight over Jerusalem. It's a city that's sacred to three of the world's major religions. Who controls it remains one of the most sensitive, most explosive issues right at the heart of everything.
Now, this challenge of drawing lines on a map and trying to create one country out of very different groups of people, it's not unique to Israel and Palestine. Not at all. It's a story that has played out all over the region, and you can see it with crystal clarity in the modern history of Iraq.
So to really get what's going on in Iraq, you have to start with the people. Now, most Muslims around the world are Sunni, but Iraq is different. About 60% of its population is Shiite, and then you have large Sunni and Kurdish minority groups. This mix is absolutely key to understanding the country.
So you might be asking, how did this happen? Well, the problem really started after World War I, when British officials literally drew new borders on the map. And these lines, drawn for their own convenience, just lumped these historically separate and sometimes rival communities, the Shiites, the Sunnis, and the Kurds, all into one new country. It was basically a recipe for conflict.
And as you can see here, those divisions aren't just religious, they're geographic. Each group is concentrated in a different part of the country. Sunnis in the center and west, Shiites in the south and east, and the Kurds up in the north. This has only made their separate identities stronger and has fueled a constant struggle for who gets to control the country.
Okay, so from conflicts created by people, we're now going to turn to a challenge from nature itself. This is one that doesn't care about politics or religion or borders. It's the most basic challenge of all, the search for water in a land of sun and sand.
The reality is, much of this region is facing a massive water crisis. There's simply not enough fresh water to go around for a population that's growing fast. And with climate change, this problem is only getting worse.
But, you know, crisis can spark incredible innovation, and the response to the water challenge has been absolutely brilliant. The key technology is called desalination. It's a process that literally turns salty seawater into fresh drinking water. And this isn't some small experiment. In Israel, for example, massive desalination plants provide a staggering 80% of the country's drinking water. 80%! And that leaves us with one final, huge question. This is a region that has always been defined by how it responds to challenges. So as resources like water get even more precious, there seem to be two paths. One leads to more conflict over the things that divide people. But the other leads to cooperation and new ideas to share the things everyone needs to survive. Which path will it be? That's the question that will define the future.